that t-shirt any power?
It is.
I got the exact same one. We could have twinned today.
And then this is your Wi-Fi, and
Okay.
that's to advance.
Okay, cool. Hey everybody, my name is Calvin Limbrick. I'm a senior program manager with the Vegetation Management Department. Some say that I have the coolest job at ComEd. I like to say that because I get to work across transmission and distribution. I do our restoration projects. I oversee our herbicide program. I oversee the goat program. I'm trying to convince them to let me play with fire. We're getting there one day. Lindsay gets to play with all fire right now. But one of the big things that I want to talk to you guys today about is working with your local utility. So Exelon is the company that owns ComEd. They're our umbrella company, so they own a couple different utilities. I think it's a total of 7 of us. It depends on how you count them, because there's some that kind of lump together and others that are separate. But they have a big push to be stewards of the environment, to have a sort of a sustainable mindset. We are certified for it. I believe it's ISO 1401. So it's a big thing for our shareholders, and it's a core value for us as a company. We know that there are millions of miles of rights of way across the United States, all creating corridors, and they have a value for the environment and the species that live there. And so it's not only sort of a duty that we recognize is something that we should do as just being good stewards and good neighbors, but also something that would actually have value if we can get everybody on board. So as ComEd Vegetation Management, our goal is to create safety and reliability while also delivering a premier customer experience. We know that customers love their trees, but they also love power. So sometimes walking that line is a very difficult task, and it takes a lot of balancing, a lot of conversations on compromise, because we also have to consider that we need to meet national and federal regulatory standards, as well as the state standards. And then we just want to be good neighbors and good stewards. So we do a lot of volunteering. We just had a huge Earth Day event where, working with the Illinois Prairie Path Corporation, we covered 62 miles. I think just about all 62 miles of the Illinois Prairie Path, in conjunction with other volunteer groups, but we filled in a couple of the gaps in Geneva, West Chicago, Maywood, and Aurora. So we volunteer as often as we can, and then we do Arbor Day events. So a lot of my colleagues right now are running around to different schools, teaching people how to plant trees properly, and planting trees at schools or different municipalities. So ComEd covers a large amount of Northern Illinois. We go from Wisconsin down to Springfield, and then across from Indiana to Iowa. We aren't the largest utility, but we are the second largest landowner in the state of Illinois. So we have a lot of opportunity to do all those things that I described. About 127,000 acres. We've done some modeling on that, and we found that there are probably about 15,000 acres of potential habitat. 500, over 500 of those acres are already enrolled in our ComEd Prairie program, and there are even some more that are ComEd partner prairies. So how do we go by advancing those 15,000 acres or even 127,000 acres? If there's any form of green space, how do we do that? We use something called integrated vegetation management. And the idea is essentially that as we go through the rights of way, we want to avoid keeping any species that are not compatible with our power lines. So we remove those, we remove all invasives that are considered targets for us, and we leave any lower growing species. In the wire zone, it's not a big clearance, it's about 10 feet, so it's a lot of red osier dogwood. In the border zone, we can get a little higher, which is 15 feet, but it still doesn't leave us a lot of room for the red buds or some of our taller or some of our smaller undergrowth trees. They will pop up, but they only get a couple of years to get into the seed bank before we end up cutting them down. However, some of our shrubs have an opportunity in the border zones. We have opportunity for shrubland, but we primarily manage for grassland. So the idea is that by clearing this all out, installing prairie and maintaining prairie, we spend less time removing invasives and incompatibles, and we spend more time getting through and encouraging that native habitat to take hold and resist the things that we don't want. So our goal is to manage for grassland, and by doing that, we save time, we save money, and we support that environmental stewardship goal that we're going for. How do we know we're doing a good job? It's a bit of a tough one. The biggest way that we see it is that as a company, we are number one, or we're number one in sustainability and reliability, or in reliability nationwide in 2022. So we received the 2023 award. 2024, we were best in the Midwest. So that tells us that everything as far as maintenance and operation is going well. But on a vegetation side, we've increased production. And I wish I had a cool graph to show you, but I didn't put it in, and I apologize for that. In a nutshell, what we're finding is that as we go across the system, our production crews, as far as trimming and removals, are moving faster. They have less work to do. And our herbicide crews are using less herbicide, and they're doing more acres per year. So to give you an idea, I want to say that in 2023, we did about 3,000 acres. Last year, we did 3,600. This year, we are 440 acres ahead of what we typically do. So I don't know how far we'll be at the end of the year, but we're already ahead of schedule, and leaf out is just starting. Another way that we do it is we look at our monarch candidate conservation agreement with assurances. And essentially, because we're trying to see how much habitat we've advanced for the monarch, we kind of capture whether or not that 15,000 acres that we have for conservation is advancing, period. So far, out of the 15,000 acres that we've enrolled, well, we enrolled the full system, but of the 15,000 that we've committed, 11,340 acres have been adopted, which is our goal, I believe, for this year. So we're in year 5 out of the ramp up period. We are aiming to do a certain number of acres per year. Last year's goal was about 9,000, and we exceeded it last year, hitting this year's goal. So we've progressed more acres per year than we intended to. Sorry, I had to get myself there. We know there's about 9.1 acres or milkweed stems per plot. So what we do is they actually go around and we plant milkweed in every single span year to year. And through our surveying for the candidate conservation agreement, we found that there's an average of about 9.1 to 10 milkweed stems per plot. And we also track monarchs, but I don't know if that's necessarily a gauge that we're doing well. It's just like, hey, we saw a monarch or we did it. It's a fun fact. But we've distributed about 6 million milkweeds since we started doing that program. And we've got an additional million that should be out as of the end of May of this year. So that's going to be a 7 million.
Calvin, can I ask a clarifying question?
Take it away, Ted.
In the last slide, you talked about your sampling plot. Are those 3 by 3 meter plots standard, or are they bigger?
They're bigger. 150 square feet.
Not confident answering that.
Okay, it's a big plot.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's not just a little typical sample size.
Correct.
Okay.
But it is random, so it could be anything from ag to
Okay.
high quality berry. Absolutely. All right. So visually, what that looks like is as we go through time, you'll see that in about 2007 in DeKalb, it was all grapevine. I know it's maybe not the best picture, but grapevine. We had some taller trees in there. We went through and removed those invasives and incompatibles. And we got this nice clear cut sort of look that you had 2013, which is a lot of utilities will have. But the goal then is to take it a little bit further and eventually get it to the point where you can see Joe Pye weed, goldenrod, maybe hopefully not goldenrod, but other species that would be more indicative of a grassland than maybe a woodland. One of the cool ones we did was the Illinois Beach State Park. It's not our property. It's not a ComEd prairie, but it ended up showing that after we go through and do this, there are a lot of high quality species that can come through and result in sort of a restoration effect in an area. So we have these special projects and we do them for a number of reasons. One might be to increase floristic diversity in native vegetation. We might have a landowner conflict where they just don't want us there. So we're kind of trying to push that right away ahead faster so it looks nice and we have to spend less time there. There are some areas where, like, for example, the Great Western Trail used to be a railway, and so it's got a lot of buckthorn seed in it. It's really hard to control. There's been a ton of construction in there. So we're putting a lot of effort and kind of doubling down in those areas to make them look nice, because the residents don't like to see us come through and mow every couple of years, or do it to establish some sort of a partnership with local landowners. So a couple example of these is Skokie Valley Bike Path. The communities there wanted to see something a little bit more than ComEd mowing all the time. So we have native restoration services who oversee this project for us. And now it's beautiful. We're looking to expand it a little bit further south into Highland Park. Buffalo Grove reached out recently and said, hey, we've got the Buffalo Grove Prairie, which is this yellow polygon down here. And we've got a lot of issues with invasive species just north of the prairie. What can we do about that? So we went in, we mowed, we're going to herbicide the frag and the buckthorn that's there. And there's no intention of making it a high quality restoration. The idea is just to protect that remnant and maybe put in something that will benefit it, or at least keep it at bay for the safety of that remnant. And then we've also looked at, up in the top left-hand corner, are a couple of colorful polygons. Those are areas where Phragmites is a really big issue, to the point where it's a fire hazard. And that's one of those projects where it's 3 different landowners. 2 of us, the Park District and ComEd, are pretty much ready to go. We just have to make sure we have funding available. The green polygon is a homeowners association, which is leaning yes, but doesn't know how they'd fund it. Obviously, their income kind of comes from their own little community. So we'd have to probably work on having a grant, and then we've got to time it all to get it all done. So
that is all a transmission corridor, that fine?
Yeah, you can see.
Dog legs.
Yeah, you can kind of see the dog leg where it's mowed down. It's all in turf. It's maintained, and I want to say predominantly owned by the city of Buffalo Grove, but they'd like to see it converted into prairie. It's an expensive project. It would take a long time. And right now it's not a concern for us because there's no worry about incompatibles, but it's one of those partnerships where they've said, hey, this is what we want to do. We've built support for a project like this, and we know that the community would accept it. And that's exactly what I need to be able to say, okay, cool, let's take that from turf and put it into even a low quality restoration for the benefit of the environment and for the community. And then Morton Arboretum is a really big partner of ours. We do a lot of stuff with them. So I brought a Power of Smart Planting brochure, which I would absolutely encourage you all to grab as many as you'd like. Give them to your friends, your family. But the idea is essentially we went through with the Arboretum, looked at what species could be planted near power lines, distribution power lines, not transmission, and said, this is something that we want to share with the public so that they know what they can landscape with so we can benefit the urban canopy. So we worked with the Plant Health Center on that one. But we also have all this right of way that we do own in the Morton Arboretum, and Kurt and his crew are really good at working with us on trying to make sure that we match their land management plan, in that all the seeds have to be within a certain locale. Certain species have to be on that list. Certain species can't be on that list. So he reviews it, and then they spend some time doing herbicide. We spend some time doing herbicide and making sure that it meets their needs. We talk about whether or not burning is going to be an option there, although that typically falls to the environmental department for coordination. But the idea is that we're taking this from teasel and vetch and whatever else, Kentucky bluegrass, and we're slowly working it into a restoration. There are 2 ComEd prairies here, one being the pollinator plot, which is an orange, and the yellow is the extension. And then we have up in the top, the north pollinator plot, or I'm sorry, just in the corner, the gray is hard to see, is the East Prairie, which is a remnant prairie that the Morton Arboretum maintains. They also do a really cool butterfly monitoring program and floral monitoring program, which I've included some fantastic photos of. The idea being that every month throughout the year, Dave Bart from Stantec goes out, does a review to see how the right-of-way is progressing, and then makes land management recommendations based on this. This is probably the most intensive management with sort of a monitoring aspect that we do. that I'm aware. And then I've mentioned the Great Western Trail as one where the seed bank's a little bit difficult. So we're working on trying to get it underway. Grand Prairie Gateway is a line out in South Elgin to not quite Barrington or Plato Center, but running that direction where we're looking to take it. This one's another intensive one that it's a newer line. There's a lot of vegetation that's very difficult to control. So we're doing our best. The blue areas are going to be a full restoration. There's a small remnant between Fen, which is in the middle here. So partners include Kane County Forest Preserve District. And then over here, the yellows tend to be pretty good. They're kind of middle of the road, but they just need a bump. That is James Pate State Park. And then this is an example of a landowner issue where he doesn't want to let us in, so it gets really big and it becomes an issue. So what we said is, okay, we'll make it a low quality restoration with a lot of native grasses so that it can be maintained, or at least has that aggressive nature to resist the trees, and you'll have to see less of us. We try to look for other innovation opportunities in order to advance sort of that stewardship. So there's a lot of different things, from volunteering to having a discussion every year on what can we do to be better. We look at, alternative fuels, reducing idling, reducing spills. I brought some seed packets that were created. They've got some fun facts on them about what ComEd does for the environment, about our prairie program. But they're a native seed mix that anybody can throw out into the right of way or plant in their yard. One of them's for bats, and then two of them are sort of more generic. One of the two generic ones has more milkweed in it than the other. So it's a little bit of a different mix to give something an opportunity. So others have an opportunity to sort of buy into our conservation. On the distribution end, there's not a ton that we do just because that budget tends to be a little bit tighter for maintenance reasons. But we do try to look for opportunities where we can leave topped or trimmed dead standing trees for wildlife. That's one of our programs, is focusing on benefiting bats, because bats seem to love edge habitat. And we're trying to track those and see if maybe there's an opportunity for a study in the future. Herbicide applications, we always want to try to use less herbicide. The way that we do our applications is very targeted. So Stantec tends to go up and down the right of way, spray each individual incompatible or invasive species, and then move on to the next site. In the winter, we do basal bark, so we'll go and they'll paint specifically those individual trees. And then we use different mixes depending on whether or not it's a riparian area or an upland area. Our tree trimming contractors do the same thing when they do removals. But one of the things we're looking at is using drones for herbicide. So the idea being that it uses a little bit less chemical, very surgical. It uses the propellers to drive it straight down, so you don't have to worry about drift. And they can only fly if it's 10 miles an hour winds or less, which limits the number or the amount of time that we can do treatments throughout the year. But it is a little bit better, and it's kind of nicer for some of those areas where you need something a little bit more surgical, or you're trying to cover something a little bit taller without having to worry about, a crew spraying straight up in the air, which is something we don't encourage. Everybody loves hearing about the goats. We have a sensitive area down near Starved Rock, and we use goats for targeted grazing as an opportunity. But the idea is essentially we're working together to try and find partners. So one of the reasons that I was excited to speak here today is because if you guys have a group, or whether it's volunteer or a program or an organization that has a right of way running through your space, then I'm open to any kind of opportunity for collaboration, discussions on what we can do to be good neighbors or to sort of enhance your project. Sometimes the best thing the biggest thing that we need is eyes on the ground, because with all this land, I can only get around to so many places so fast to see if our management is working the way that it needs to, or to understand the dynamics of that area and what people there are looking to accomplish. So, if there's any opportunity for collaboration, I'm open to it. And that includes, if you need trees, we'll give you trees as long as you don't plant them near the power lines. So do you have a question, Ted, or are you pensive?
Do you need goats?
Do we need goats? Like you have a contractor
I
or,
know a guy, I met a guy up in Milwaukee
okay,
that does goats up there and he wants to bring them down here.
Yeah.
Start anything down here.
we're always open to finding more goat folks
And we'll
because
connect
they can only, yes, please do. They can only travel so far, especially during the summer. So this year we're trying to do a spring application to see how that goes. But I mentioned Morton Arboretum, Lincoln Park Zoo. We take a lot of our trimmings to Lincoln Park Zoo as a means of recycling. So if you have animals you'd like to feed trimmings to, I don't know if I can deliver them, but it's kind of a fun thing. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like you have a lot of partnerships already with a lot of Chicago Limits Alliance partners. I would love if you want to do a cafe that brought everybody together to talk about like the trimming aspect, the
Mhm.
partnership with Morton and even the municipality, like with Buffalo Grove, to kind of showcase the different ways that these come together.
Yeah,
Hopefully could reach a broader audience. I would be happy to work with you on that.
I would be happy to do it. And one of the things that we really didn't get a chance to get into is, Lindsay, you've got the Common Prairie program, and that's a whole other half of once we get things advanced, then, we make sure that they're taken care of on a higher level than a lot of the rights of way that I'm doing here. So.
Do you want to ask the chat if there are any questions? We scheduled,
Actually, they'll have to.
oh yeah,
Oh, I don't,
If you ask the chat has any questions.
we scheduled fewer presentations this quarter so that we could dive deeper.
looking for the chat. Hey, chat, do you have any questions?
For everyone that joined us on Zoom.
For everybody that joined us on Zoom. I don't know how to pull up Zoom.
Oh, it's just hiding at the top.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry, we use Teams. That's the one I'm used to. All right, I got a chat here. Silence. Maybe I put him to sleep.
No, it's not.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
In our conversations that you, Lindsay, and I have had, I don't think this came up, but do you have the ability, thinking of not this group, but the green infrastructure group,
Mhm.
to share your data in terms of management so that we can understand moving towards that goal and metrics? Or do you not have the ability because you guys are super smart?
It would depend on the metrics. Like I could probably share the progression of how many acres we do per year, how much herbicide we use.
But not like the locations on the GIS.
What
No,
about, like,
probably not.
Floristic flop, like what about like demonstrating that you are shifting it to grassland flora, however, high quality.
yeah, turf to progression,
Yeah.
just showing the progression.
Right. I could probably do individual sites and show progression over time. I would have to think about that.
And then-
Yeah, usually, sorry, go on.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, one of the big security issues is like making sure that we're not sharing system information. So like individual site information is usually fine. It just has to be run through a couple different people.
Yeah, also regarding, your, metrics of success, like, would it be a problem to share like summaries like you did here? of,
Yeah.
Like how much you're taking on and how much of it is turning into grassland and how long it's taking? I know you kind of did that, but like even on the broader scale of like out of those whole 15,000 acres, I
Mhm.
think I saw an 11,000 number in there.
Yeah, so 11,000 is the number of plots or number of acres that have been adopted into the CCAA. So per the CCAA requirements, they're moving towards monarch habitat or monarch habitat.
Which is really impressive. I mean, it kind of seems like you guys set 15 and then you just like got to 11, which is awesome. But
Don't I
now
know
the
it?
sort of like quality
Right.
of it, is that stuff that you are measuring? It sounds like you're measuring, but then would you be able to share like for the 5 years, it was kind of stuck in tall goldenrod, but our management has changed it to little blue stem or?
Yeah, I'd have to talk about our biologist, or talk to our biologist about that, but I don't think it would be, or ecologist, sorry. I don't think it would be that much of an issue. I don't know if it'll be as impressive as maybe it sounds when it's on a summary slide, but And we don't do it as intensively. So there is data collected that said that kind of checks the box, which is nice. But I don't think we're going to see anything like higher than a potentially advanced or potentially like basic restoration.
Yeah, but it's still valuable to know, like, it went from goldenrod to more diverse,
Yeah. Okay.
something like that, because yeah, no one's expecting the power line rights of way to become like the high quality restorations, but it's just
Right.
such an amazing effort to even do this,
Mm-hmm.
that it'd be cool to know exactly sort of what's happening.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share that story. One of the interesting things that we're starting to see with integrated vegetation management too is that the big focus tends to be on woodies. So when I say invasive, something I should have clarified is that we are focusing on like honeysuckle, buckthorn, autumn olive, and getting rid of those in addition to the incompatibles. The next thing we have to deal with is frag and reed canary. And so we're trying to look at, doing that and trying to figure out how to do it on an efficient scale, but we're at that tipping point where as we start to move faster on the woodies, we're gonna need to start spending on the other ones. And then hopefully we'll see another jump. But that's one of those ones where it starts to be like, look at this beautiful right of way that is a grassland and it's all reed canary. And you're like, Kelvin, come on.
You're talking to the right crowd. We all know that.
Good, I'm
it's
glad
like
to hear
one
it.
step at a time.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Well, there's a lot of knowledge and experience in the Chicago Wilderness Managing Healthy Landscapes group. So, lean on us when you need to.
Absolutely, we'll do. Appreciate that.
One of the thoughts that occurred to me is 2 meetings ago, we heard from this group, particularly heard from the Park District and University of Michigan on the turf alternatives.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if you're looking at that for your turf grass areas as potential to get out of just turf grass and into other things. We'd be connecting with them too.
Yeah, that would be a fun one to talk about. We have not, and I'm not sure how that program manager would receive it. And I'm not super familiar with a lot of the stuff that he does, beyond being like, hey, where can I put prairie? And usually I have enough areas that keep me busy, but yeah, I would be open to hearing more about that and potentially sharing it with him and seeing what he's looked into or what he hasn't.
Yeah, I feel like all the turf grass under power lines could certainly be like, you guys could be like a top customer for people who are developing those alternative turfs. The Botanic Garden has it going. It sounds like University of Michigan.
Yeah. I personally, I was just talking to Spencer Campbell at the Morton Arboretum. We were enjoying some magnolia flowers over a conversation of natives, but I want to replace my turf with some sort of sedge mix, and I think that would be fantastic. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is awesome. This is a really cool and important program.
Thank you.
Meadows, a lot of land, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think outside of that 15,000, a lot of it starts to become just turf rather than asphalt, turf or ag, and so that number has the opportunity to, I think, be more like 50,000.
Okay.
But it's getting out of those ag leases and changing over that turf, which tends to be more of convincing the municipalities to agree. And they're the tough ones. We've had restorations that have been mowed down and turned into turf on account of public perception. So yeah, it's a bit of a bummer.
Wow. Hopefully we're moving the ball on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Cool.
Should we go to the next?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. All right. Next up, we'll have Joe. And do you say your last name Suchecki?
Suchecki.
Suchecki. Oh, good. And then I will plug you in. Pull up your presentation. Pull that up. Okay, you think yours is in here, and then which one would it be here?
Should be the
Grassland Bird Stewardship?
Suchecki CWA. Third one from the bottom.
Third
Third from the bottom, thank you.
So if we want to go. to
Nope, not that one.
One down.
Oh, one more down,
One
sorry.
more down.
Sorry. It's my fault. Yeah. Looks like you have lots of cool presentations. This one.
That one.
Okay, great. And then let me make sure that this is shared.
Okay.
Share the right screen here.
This one. Share.
Perfect.
All right.
Maybe do a slideshow.
Exactly. That's the plan. Show up well on Zoom? No? Are you getting presenter view?
But
No, yeah, let me do slideshow
Yeah, it's showing as presenter view on Zoom.
from the beginning.
there we go. I
Let's see.
Yeah.
That's better?
think so.
Okay,
We're good?
we're good.
Great.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, so, well, thanks for having me. I'm Joe Suchecki, and I'm the volunteer steward and bird monitor for the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County, and have been doing that for a long time. And I concentrate on one preserve, which is Springbrook Prairie in Naperville. And I wanted to give you a presentation today on some bird monitoring that I'm doing. And go from there. So Springbrook is a 1,800 acre preserve, so it's a really large site, sits in the middle of Naperville. The district bought the land in the 1970s, when it was all farmland. And the original purpose of that was they're going to build this really big recreational lake and ball fields and all kinds of stuff. Well, that never happened. And over the time, once they bought the land, they planted it in European grass cover crops. And the land stayed pretty much idle for, over 10 years or 12 years. And eventually that attracted lots of grassland birds and became known very much so for its grassland birds, and actually is a dedicated nature preserve because of that. And it's primarily an open grassland habitat and completely surrounded by suburban development. And this is a aerial photo of Springbrook. Has a lot of nice features. There's a lot of restoration that has been done. This central kind of rectangle is like 960 acres. So that's kind of the biggest piece of land that the district has that's not kind of intact. It's a large parcel of land, so it's very nice. And Springbrook is primarily an open habitat for most of it. And so it's open grasslands, some wetlands, so it's a really good place for the grassland birds. And I've been doing monitoring there. I started in 1994 and have been doing it ever since. And we have lots of data on lots of birds, but what I wanted to concentrate today in this talk was on grassland birds. And these are 7 species of birds that are obligate grassland nesters, and that these 7 will only nest in large grasslands, and they don't nest in other habitats. I mean, in the grasslands, we have lots of other stuff like, red-winged blackbirds and yellow throats, but those species nest somewhere else. But these in particular need to have these large grassland birds. And as you know, this is a graphic from the Audubon report that came out a few years ago about the decline in birds nationally. And if you look at the bottom of that tan color, that's the grassland birds. So the grassland birds have been declining the most out of any group of birds in the country. And so they're of specific concern. So one of the things that we want to figure out is whether the grassland bird populations at Springbrook are increasing or decreasing. How does Springbrook compare to other areas? One question that always comes up is whether the European or cool season grasses is a better habitat for grassland birds than restored habitat. And then really looking at the long-term bird monitoring, can we come up with some habitat characteristics or management plans that will result in stable or increasing bird populations? So just a little bit about the monitoring. As I said, been doing it since 1994 continuously, and I have 4 transects. and then 20 point counts. And only 12 of them are shown here on the map because those are the areas that are important for grassland birds. The transects I do once a year. The point counts I do 3 minutes, and I go to the point and count all the birds within a 5-minute period, and 3 replicates on the point counts in June. And all the surveys are completed between 5 and 7:30 in the morning. So it's actually a rather unique data set in that I've been the one doing this for 31 years, and they're all in the same place, all right in the prime breeding season, and all done very early in the morning. So it's a good set of data. Just a number, we'll talk a little bit about cool season grasses and restored grasses. Throughout the presentation, the C will be the cool season grasses, which are primarily vegetation European grasses that were frankly planted there as cover crops in the 1970s. And so they're primarily fescue, bromes, bluegrass. They've never been planted with prairie species, and generally they have not been managed very much in terms of things we're doing, whether it's shrub or tree removal or mowing or burns. And then the restored points have been areas where the district has restored prairie grasses. Started out in the early 80s went down there and planted all big blue stem. So some of those areas are still all big blue stem, but they've changed over the years. So they've been seeded in various forms of prairie grasses and forbs. And there's been a lot of management, whether it's burning or mowing or, removal of unwanted vegetation. But one thing to point out is that the district never went through and just nuked the whole site when they did the prairie restoration. So there's always some remnant of cool season grasses and lots of those plots. So looking at data analysis, I combine the transect data and combine the point data. And for the site-wide analysis, I kind of lumped all the sites together there. And I used a statistical test called the Mann-Kendall test, which is used to determine trends in time series data. And similarly, for the point count analysis, which gets us further into being able to look at habitats and specific of different sites. I also use that Mann-Kendall test and can compare different sites and look at the management history and see what's been done there. So first of all, so how are the overall grassland bird populations doing at Springbrook? Are they increasing or decreasing? This is the results of the trends from the Mann-Kendall test on whether the populations are decreasing or increasing. The data for the point counts is in blue and the transects is in green. Now the test it shows you a trend, but doesn't tell you how big. So then I used averages from the first part of the survey period to the end part, and that's where you come up with numbers. So the quantity here is in terms of percent changes in the bird populations per year. So clearly you can see that sedge wrens, grasshopper sparrow, and meadowlarks have been decreasing by a number of percentage points per year. The yeses are whether the trend was statistically significant. So you can see that those three have been decreasing. We have dickcissels have been increasing, and Henslow sparrows have been increasing by a tremendous number. When I first started, we had one pair of Henslow sparrows for the whole site, and now they're just all over the place. So they've done very well. And then we have two other species, Savannah sparrow and bobolink, where you actually get a little bit of difference. But I think in that case, the trends are pretty weak. So I would call those populations probably stable, that they're stable or maybe a little bit of an increase. And when I made up this graphic, I was very pleased to see that for the most part, the transect data and the point data agree. So we can have a little bit of confidence that that's the case. So that's good to know, but we want to know, well, is it comparable to other locations, other sites, and look in terms of grassland birds. And so I essentially look for other data that has some trends in grassland birds, and I found 3 sets of data that we can compare to. The first is the Bird Conservation Network data. They did a trend analysis a couple of years ago, and they have volunteers go out and do point counts all over the Chicago region, and they did a trend analysis, so we have data for that. We also have the U.S. Geological Survey breeding bird survey data for Illinois, which is a survey that's been done for many, many years. It's essentially a roadside count where they have volunteers go out and count birds all over the state for, they stop every half mile and count at 3 minutes, and they've done a trend analysis. And then also there's been work at Medewan by Jim Herkert and Bill Glass on the bird populations there. So that gives us something to look at. And so this is a comparison of that data. So we have Springbrook in yellow comparing what I found at Springbrook. We have the, in red is BCN data. Green is the breeding bird survey data, and then the blue is data from Medewan. And in talking to Jim Herkert, it wasn't completely, their number that I used was kind of their regression slope. And he says it's not exactly the same percent change per year, but it's pretty close. So from this, you can kind of look and see that, Springbrook, sedge wrens have probably been decreasing more than at other locations. And, but and Henslow sparrows have been increasing here a lot, because that number is 4.6, but that's times 10. So it's actually 46% a year that's been increasing. So from this, we kind of look at grassland birds at Springbrook are doing probably better than at other places. If they are declining, you're getting a less of a decline from the birds at Springbrook. And, the increases are either bigger or about the same. So for comparison purposes, we kind of say, or can say, that the grassland birds are either stable or showing smaller declines than at other places, except for grasshopper sparrow and sedge wren. And this kind of gives you an idea of how the data show what's going on at Springbrook over 30 years. So that's good. So then we can also look at the analysis of the point counts to get a kind of dig down and see what long-term trends are at each point. And we can identify the habitats characteristics by looking at that data and analyze those differences in relation to what's been going on in terms of habitat management. So first question was, how do cool season grasses compare to prairie restoration fields? And this kind of stems from early monitoring the first several years at Springbrook. I found that the grassland birds very strongly preferred the cool season grasses over the prairie restoration fields. The number of species and the abundance were much higher in the cool season fields, and they didn't really use the restored fields, especially those with tall grasses, big blue stem, or a lot of forbs. So there was some indication that they might be using the shorter grass prairie with little blue stem side oats and prairie dropsy, that they were better. And if you talk to people about grassland birds, people will tell you that, yeah, the other places have found that as well, that the grassland birds really like the cool season grasses for some reason. So here's just an example. Cool season grasses on the left here, they tend to be shorter. This is particularly a fescue field. They generally, this was a picture taken later in the cycle, so that, in this field in particular, we're already getting a little bit of goldenrod and stuff coming in. And then on the other side is the restored point, which has a lot more forbs and can be taller as well. So one of the things we can do with the data is we could look at differences between cool season and restored points. And this is a graph comparing 2 points, C1 and cool season point and R1, the restored point. Then it also has data from early 1997, and then comparing that to 2024. And you can go through the different species, and you can look at this in a variety of ways, obviously. You can see for the bobolink, there were a lot more bobolinks early in the program, and then there was a decline at that site. But compare that to the restored points, and you see that it's been much lower originally, but then it's come up quite a bit as time has gone on. And similarly for the meadowlark and Savannah sparrow, Savannah sparrow is one that really likes the cool season grasses. But you can see some in the grasshopper sparrow and Henslow sparrow, dickcissel, some higher numbers in the restored grasses. So that's one way you can go through and compare all that. The other thing you can do, or that I did, was for each species, graph the abundance of the bird at cool season grasses and restored grasses. And so this is a chart for the sedge wren. And you can see in the early part of it, the cool season grass sedge wrens were higher in the cool season grasses, but then there was kind of a switch about 8th or 9th year, and then you had more sedge wrens going on in the restored sites. And that's true of bobolink as well, that there was a shift that went on. Other species, like this example for Henslow sparrow, it really didn't seem to make a difference whether the fields were cool season or restored points. The populations in both of those different types of vegetation were about the same. And then, the one difference for all this was Savannah sparrows, where you see a clear preference, a lot more Savannah sparrows in the cool season grasses. They really like those cool season fields. So regarding cool season and restored fields, long-term monitoring was different than the initial few years, in that it showed some small declines in the grassland birds at the cool season sites, and some increase in the birds at the restored sites. So in terms of the species, bobolink, eastern meadowlark, and sedge wrens over the long term, we're doing a little bit better at the restored sites. For dickcissel, Henslow sparrow, and grasshopper sparrow, there's no difference. And then for Savannah sparrow, clear difference for grassland field. And the one exception to doing better in the restored fields after a while was that we have one field that's really dominated by big blue stem, and they're the only thing that remained after it was planted is bobolink. So they really don't like the really tall grasses. A couple confounding factors is the cool season sites weren't managed. So essentially there wasn't a lot of work done there. And also, as I said before, there is a little cool season component. So then move on to this question about habitat and characteristics and management practices. And you can look at the data, got a lot of data, so you can look at it a number of ways. This is a chart showing the grassland bird trends at each of our points per species, and the red boxes are declines and the blue boxes are increases. And you can look at this in two different ways. One, by species, you can go across and see, like for grasshopper sparrow, that pretty much every place the grasshopper sparrow has declined, as opposed to the Henslow sparrow, which has really gone up at virtually every place. So you can look at that. Then you can look across at each location, and you can see, for example, if there's lots of red going across, like in C2, where the birds are all down there, then that's the place that you can look at more carefully and see, well, what's going on at those areas where there's either been an increase or decrease. Another way to do that is I plotted the abundance of birds, the number of birds found at each point, versus the species on the y-axis, and plotted those points for 1997 and 2024. So if we're doing the right things, what you want is to find all these circles kind of moving towards the upper right, because that indicates more grassland birds and higher diversity of species. And so when I did this, you can look at this and say, well, something's going wrong at C1 and C2, where the birds have gone down a lot. And we can look at C3 and see, for the cool season grasses, that the number of birds are going up there. And similarly, for the restored points, you can do the same thing. And you have this kind of shift, either downward or upward, and that gives you an idea. You can think about what's going on at those places. And so, for example, at C2, where we had that big decrease in grassland bird abundance, this was initially a fescue field with high numbers of grassland birds. I forgot exactly when it was. Maybe Brian will remember that, when they did some development at Springbrook. So they put a big dog park in next to C2, 2004. And they constructed a trail, a big limestone trail through it. A few years later, they did restoration on the creek, which was a great project, and really has increased that. But it changed the vegetation. That's part of this point, and it from being a fescue field to being a wetland, and higher vegetation and stuff. A significant amount of cattails, brush, and forbs have moved in. So the result, if all that happened, that's why those grassland birds decreased at that point. So you can go through and do that, and kind of came up with some general habitat characteristics. First is that things that result in increasing or stable bird populations, tree and shrub removal is clear. These grassland birds clearly don't like woody plants. So if you get even a small amount of shrubs and trees in that, they just abandon the area. The birds seem to like the short grass stature, of whether it's European grasses or prairie grasses. They like grass-dominated fields. So if you get too forby, then the birds don't like it. And so, the district has been mowing to control goldenrod and forbs at some of these sites, and that seems to be better. And then we have this base on the restored sites of the cool season grasses. On the other hand, you can look at the sites and see pretty much the opposite of what I just said. If there's increasing trees and shrubs, if you put lots of human disturbance and trails, or you lack management, you get a decrease in birds. And This slide shows the difference between, I looked at managed points versus unmanaged points for each species. And for example, this one on bobolink, which is on the left side, you can see that at managed points, the bobolinks have actually been increasing or steady. And at places that have not been managed, those fields, you can see a steady decline in bobolink numbers. That's pretty much true of all the grassland birds. So it shows the importance of managing these sites. Another interesting example, as I said, is the grasshopper sparrow, which has really declined. It used to be real common at Springbrook, and there's been a really significant decline, so that by 2012, I essentially found no more grasshopper sparrows at Springbrook. And this is part of a much larger regional decline. Grasshopper sparrows just aren't around anymore for most places. So then from 2012 to 2016, we didn't find any grasshopper sparrows. And then a pair showed up in 2017. And then again, now from 2021, I'm finding more grasshopper sparrows. And so the interesting point about where I am finding those grasshopper sparrows is that the only place I'm finding them now is in fields that have been mowed. So the mowing has really made a significant difference, and we're starting to get a few grasshopper sparrows back. So it's a good indication that if we can find the key management characteristic, that these birds will come back. So that's good. So in answer to our question, again, we confirmed several well-known habitat characteristics for grassland birds: shorter stature grasses, tree and shrub free fields, and we confirmed, how woody vegetation management is really critical, and then a lot of other things that we can do to try and increase the grassland birds. So in terms of kind of generalizing this, I think it's important that the land management agencies really develop and implement management plans. And that includes both not only restored sites, but cool season grassland sites. Because that was one thing out of my looking at the long-term monitoring data, I hadn't realized that there was a slow decline in all the grassland cool season sites. Because those sites, they're 50 something years old now. So they're starting to deteriorate and the other stuff is moving in. So for a long time, that fescue field, it was just all nice knee-high fescue for, which the birds love. It's, again, in looking at whatever you might be doing with your sites, it's good to implement some bird monitoring to track populations and gauge success of your efforts, because I always like to say, you let the birds tell you what they like. So you can see how you're doing. And for those of you who do have stewards, I'm a steward, but I'm a bird person. So you can recruit a bird person that has an interest in grassland birds. That always helps, because I go out there and keep all those fields clear of all those calorie pear trees that we have. So anyway, I think because they are grassland birds are significantly declining, I think there's an opportunity in Chicagoland region to help with conservation and trying to make a comeback. It seems to me that we should be identifying where there are grassland bird populations nesting already, and avoid placing trails and other facilities through there. One thing, if you have cool season grass fields that do have good populations of grassland birds, you might want to consider leaving them there just for that purpose. But if you do want restoration, use short grass native species and some forbs, and certainly implement habitat management at all the sites. So this kind of sums up what the bird monitoring tells us. The best grassland bird habitat is the short grass dominated fields without trees and shrubs. So this was done shortly after a burn, but that's kind of what we want to see, or what the birds want to see. And some acknowledgements. I obviously want to thank the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. They've let me run pretty much, do what I want down there. I shouldn't say that. We coordinate a lot. And in fact, I got to say that the staff of the district has been great. They, they respond to my calls and needs, and we do everything together. So it's been a great working with the ecology staff and crew. I want to thank Jim Herkert for some advice on this presentation and talk, and another friend, Hillary Holachek, who helped me on statistics, and the Springbrook volunteers who come out all the time and help keep things going. So thanks for your attention.
You have such an impressive array of data.
There is,
So
and there's
it's really amazing.
there is a lot more for me to look at, so I'll get to that soon. I need to look at the other birds that are around and other habitats and stuff, but wanted to get the grassland birds out. So, yep,
So you talk about how important it is for these tracts of land to be quite large.
Yes.
To track this bird. Can you say, and I'm sure it's different for every species, but can you say like it needs to be X number of acres in
Yep.
order to be attractive?
kind of the I think kind of the general thought is you need like at least a 50-acre site.
50.
Yeah, 50 to have grassland birds. A lot of them require, the bigger the better, but 50 to 100 acres. I think if you get below 50, you just don't see grassland birds in those areas. And it kind of depends on what's around it, because I have a couple, grassland fields at Springbrook that are a little bit isolated and completely surrounded by trees and brush and stuff. And yet there isn't any grassland birds in there. While if you got rid of the boundary stuff, you might have some.
You might not, this didn't really hit on this, but I was really surprised about the cool sedge results. And is that like an animal behavioral component, like that the lower they feel like they can see predators, or it's clearly not like a food source, because you would think there'd be more food source in there.
Yeah, that's a good question. We know it occurs. No one's quite sure why. It's really an issue that they haven't figured out as to why they really like them. I mean, they seem to like the shorter grass, and I think they like because the European grasses are just kind of a carpet, and have nice thin stems. And I think they like that, have thinner grasses to make their nests. And but yeah, so why the birds like that is not clear, but it's clear that they do. So because you'll find birds nesting in pastures and alfalfa fields, anything like that is where they like it. So
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and I loved laying in the grass and watching the meadowlarks.
Right.
And so I haven't been back in the spring for enough time
Yeah.
to know if they still do that, but I know that was true.
right.
then.
Yep. So, and I know I get a lot of questions on that, because, you'd think that the birds would be more attracted to what looks like a native prairie, but I think there's not a lot of data from around here from early before the settlers came in to show what was here beforehand. I mean, but I think by like, even at Springbrook, you know, the early surveyor maps, you know, already, it was like from 1830, you know, there was already agricultural fields and, you know, settlers there by that time. And so, you know, and they, you know, I don't think the biologists showed up for quite a while after that to really do any work. So it's hard to say what they had. And, you know, well, and then obviously pretty much all the prairie was destroyed. So, you know, there was, you know, one of my friends suggested, well, maybe they didn't have any choice and they just found the pasture fields a good substitute. And then over the 150 years, they kind of adapted to that and now kind of prefer it, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Are you guys managing entirely for these species of birds, or do you have other interests that you're managing?
There's always other interests. But at Springbrook, one of the, I think, priorities for the site is to manage for grass and birds.
Given that, have you all used Bethany to thin out some of the taller Indian grass, or not?
We really haven't.
We have other locations we're planning on.
Okay.
But we have other.
And it's worked pretty well.
It's worked well, and there's possibility it might have an effect on tall goldenrod. And that's now seen, because we have a tall goldenrod problem.
Right. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. And it's grassland bird nesting season.
That's right, it is.
Almost.
And the Henslow sparrows are here early and quite abundant now. So I better not, well, let me.
Yeah.
Let me just drop in to see if there's any questions from the Zoom attendees. You can drop them in the
yeah.
chat.
Where you exit out of your slideshow the right way. Don't want to lose data.
Yeah, as soon as we get past that season, we basically both our tractors down there.
Currently in use.
Grants, so.
Oh, maybe I didn't close yours. That's not open.
Oh, there is one, sorry, there is one question from Samantha Chavez. So although this wasn't measured, do you have any sense if some of the species prefer short versus medium height?
I don't have anything, any data because we don't have any true, really short grass stuff at Springbrook, any sites. So I couldn't say.
So does that mean it's all medium height to tall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all, I mean, the shortest ones were like about knee height, you know, for the fescue fields.
Yeah, there's just like the western Great Plains with buffalo grass.
Right, yeah, yeah,
Very
we don't
short.
have any real short
Yeah,
stuff.
you get
so.
too much moisture here in this
Yeah.
part of the world. Yeah.
Yep. Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
And if anyone didn't see, the Chicago Tribune page 1 had a prairie birds in steep decline headline on Earth Day on Tuesday this week. So the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to do a little bit of an update about how the 2024 volunteer coordinators across the CWA submitted a couple of results or a couple of summaries, and I wanted to share those with you. It's nice in Q1 to talk about, well, maybe that'll show presenter mode again. Yeah. About how much the impact that volunteers are having is in the area. So obviously volunteers like Joe are out in the preserves doing a lot. And I just asked the volunteer coordinators from the different counties and organizations, if they would provide a little 2024 summary that I could present to people, and they sent me a few numbers. And so we'll just go over those. And this is primarily a reminder that there are a lot of hands, eyes, and ears out there that as each of the county districts and other conservation organizations engage more volunteers, more is done. Better voters, better ambassadors and educators in the communities. It's a really big deal. And I'm biased because I came to this work through volunteering. Used to be a GIS analyst and now I'm in ecology. Okay, so the Forest Preserves of Cook County, Chris DePra sent some numbers. They have 476 active leaders. It's a really important number that I asked for. I asked for number of workday leaders because each workday leader can host a workday of 10 or 20 people. And, the more leaders there are out there, the more that can be accomplished. They have a robust certification process at FPCC. The other counties also do too. I think maybe Cook has just been around a little longer doing it. So they're just certifying and licensing a lot of people every year. And then I personally wanted to add this final number here that I'll do for each of the counties that I received numbers for, which is that about 8,403 8-hour workdays worth of work was done by volunteers last year at Cook County, which I didn't convert into days, but 8,000 or into like number of employees that would be, but that's a step for the next summary.
Those active leaders are also volunteers, or are those,
This is the full volunteer hours. Yeah, so leaders and regular volunteers. The Lake County Forest Preserves, Kelly Schultz wanted to highlight something besides numbers this time. She wanted the Lake County Forest Preserves also have a very robust volunteer program, and they are really interested in prescribed burn training right now. And getting more volunteers on prescribed burns has been a high priority of theirs. And she wanted to point out that there were no opportunities or few opportunities in Indiana. And so people were driving all the way to Lake County, Illinois. And so because CWA includes Indiana and Michigan, she wanted to point out that an identified need is to have a training in Indiana, which of course is going to require understanding Indiana's laws. And so it's a different thing. And so we'll.
it's like one of the number one requests I get too. So I want to put the word out that if somebody hears of trainings, please let me know so I can keep them.
Okay.
It's my number one.
And I'll just add on the private sector side, we struggle to get all of our people in classes, so the volunteers have to.
Yeah.
They fill up quick.
Right. Yep. So Josh from Stantec, if anyone on Zoom couldn't hear, just said that on the private sector side, the same thing is happening. So there's definitely a need for more classes. And as we heard maybe 2 meetings ago, or was it in Wisconsin at our last meeting, we had the prescribed burn committee update, and they are working on this. So, we are plugging along on this issue. Forest Preserve District of Will County reported that they have a lot more dedicated long-term volunteers right now than they are accumulating new ones, but a lot is happening. So they came up with something like 1,600 8-hour workdays accomplished by volunteers. And you can see a couple of the summaries here. They had also shared that some of the volunteer hours they included were from the volunteer services department. So volunteers not only collecting seeds, lighting fires, and cutting buckthorn, but doing administrative work too, which is important and helpful. And then Jackie Barrow at McHenry County gave us a little bit of a different looking update, some graphs. And I really like this because it demonstrates that just over the years, having a staff person like Jackie or Krista Pra at Cook or Kelly Schultz at Lake makes a big difference in the sense that they're gaining every year if this is someone's job to help focus on, or if there's a team. And so they have increasing numbers of volunteers over the last couple of years. And then here, this is the number of hours. So with the number of volunteers came the number of hours increasing year over year as well, pretty much. Again, something like 1,000 work days, regular employee work 8-hour days. And a lot of these people, I want to also say, are good at what they're doing. They've learned a lot about this over the years. And so a lot of people are out there doing it. I thought this was an interesting graph. This is the total number of restoration days versus the total number of restoration days with an active volunteer. So it really demonstrates that you can maybe increase by a third to double your number of days people are out in the preserves, working on the preserves by having a robust volunteer program. So, you know, we like to give this update in the first quarter because the volunteer coordinators and, you know, they have other titles as well, like stewardship ecologists, are summarizing these things for the year before. And so it's a nice opportunity for us to take a look. So with that, that's all we had for today. But we do have a field trip for those who are here and we're interested in going to check out Fullersburg Woods. And then, you know, if you want to stick around and join us for a little social hour, we're going to go to the York Tavern for their happy hour at 4. But thank you everybody for being here today. And for those on Zoom, we really appreciate you logging in and listening. We're going to continue to try to have engaging conversations and presentations. I think we'll stick to maybe 2 or 3 per session because we tried a few more in the fall last year and it was kind of a lot to get through. So I thought today was a better balance. But we're open to feedback all the time and hope that more people get involved with this. And thanks to ComEd for having us here. Kelvin and Lindsay, this was it was really great to hear about the work that you guys are doing. All right, well, thank you all and we'll see you next quarter, hopefully before then.